The United States and China set for preliminary trade talks tomorrow in Switzerland. Joining us right now to discuss it and much more is White House National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett. Kevin, thank you for being here today.
Sure.
Let's talk through what we've heard from this framework, first of all, from the deal with the United Kingdom, on how you think this is going to impact the economy. Obviously, not one of our largest trading partners.
Right.
But this perhaps provides a framework for what we might anticipate to see in some other trade deals as well. What are the key points here that you see?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is a framework for the deals that we're going to see ahead. It's got a 10% rate that's kind of a ring around the country with respect to U.K. goods, but with respectful exceptions like the quotas for autos. And I think in our view, that makes it so that there's a lot more revenue coming in that the U.S. can use to make American workers and American firms more competitive. And the other thing is that we put a high priority on advantaging American farmers. And so if you look at this deal, go look at the press release that the beef producers put out as soon as the deal was signed. We know that it's been a tough time for farmers in the U.S., and a big reason is that they've been treated so poorly by our trading partners. And getting the U.K., which has been a country that's been pretty reluctant to let our beef and other products in, come to the table and open up their markets to U.S. farmers is a big, big win.
We did hear, though, from the policymaking group for the United States automakers that they were disappointed by this news, to hear that U.K. Autos that are made in the U.K. and maybe have zero parts that are made in the United States can come in and get a better deal than those that are compliant with USMCA and maybe contain half of their parts from U.S. autos having a much higher tariff rate. How do you address that?
Well, there's a 100% way to address any divergence in these things, and that's to make sure that the parts are more made in the U.S. And so onshoring of production has been a key objective of President Trump's. If you look at the jobs data and the capital spending data in the first quarter, where we saw a 20% boom in equipment investment, you can see that it's working. But yes, there's going to be some adjustment. That's the purpose of the policy.
No, but the cars that are made in the U.K. can come in without any parts made in the country with a lower tariff.
That would be a bigger concern on an economic front if there weren't a cap on how many cars were coming in. So it's just capped at about what was coming in before, so that U.S. producers don't have to worry that they're suddenly going to lose their market compared to what's been happening in the past.
What impact will this have on the greater U.S. economy to have a trade deal like this in place?
I think it's going to be enormous positive because now people see what the next deals are going to look like. And, congrats to Secretary Lutnick and Jameson Greer, who are leading this effort. And I can tell you that I've been briefed on about 24 other deals that are this close to being resolved. And what that's going to do is it's going to be very settling for markets because they're going to understand what the rules are. They're going to see that the rules advantage American producers and American workers and aren't horribly disruptive, like some of the Wall Street firms have been saying they would be if you look back a month or two.
Kevin, how much money should the Treasury expect to be bringing in annually as a function of tariffs once these deals are remedied or negotiated?
The problem with that question, or it's a really smart question, and the problem with that question is it depends on what happens with the negotiations. It depends what happens with the negotiations with the Chinese in Geneva this weekend. It's if I put a number out, then in some sense it's upending the negotiation because we're saying, oh, well, that's what the U.S. position is. I can say that I spoke as they were getting on the plane with Jameson and Secretary Hassett last night, wishing them Godspeed, and everything that's been going on with the meeting in Switzerland is very promising to us. We're seeing extreme respect, treating both sides with respect. We're seeing collegiality and also sketches of positive developments. And so I think that as we move forward and remove, hopefully, uncertainty on China and get deals like the U.K., then people understand what President Trump's trade policy has been all about, and then we can move on to the thing that I've been working hardest on. I was just in the Roosevelt Room with the Speaker of the House and the Majority Leader and Scott this week negotiating the tax bill, which is going to be the biggest tax cut ever. So there's a lot of positive stuff going on.
Can you also speak to just what I imagine are these favored nation clauses that are being put into these contracts or agreements around tariffs, meaning that the U.K. obviously wants certain things, wants to have better terms than others. You're going to have India, I imagine, to the extent they want to do a deal with the U.S., they're going to want to have better terms than China can get. How is that all going to work?
Well, I think that in the end, there's going to be a lot of similarity between the people that come to the table, make the concessions that the president wants, and then agree to be treated well, as the U.K. is being treated well right now. I think that what every country comes to the table with is a list of the things that they care the most about. And as I look at all the negotiations and how they're progressing, the one thing I can say is that that's a much harder thing for the EU to do than for everybody else. That's why we're moving so fast with so many countries, because at the EU, you got lots of different countries, so the countries disagree amongst themselves about what the priorities would be. But yeah, I'm very confident that in the end there's going to be very similar treatment, but on different things, because different countries care about different things.
But Kevin, you said that you don't think these trade deals the tariffs are going to be as disruptive as a lot of Wall Street firms have predicted.
Right.
Is that because you think that these tariffs are going to come down dramatically as trade deals are cleared in rapid fire?
Well, we'll see what happens, but I think the U.K. success happening so fast is a model of what everybody's shooting for. And the fact that even before Liberation Day, at the beginning of the year, negotiations were already ongoing with Jameson Greer and Howard Lutnick. And so there's a lot of progress made. And yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more deals like the U.K. deal in the coming weeks.
We're quoting you that these trade deals won't be as disruptive as some people, but I think you said and at least meant that the tariffs won't be as disruptive. The trade deals, I think everyone agrees, would be helpful if it brings down the high tariffs that had been proposed on April 2nd.
Well, it's really the non-tariff barrier, the huge positive shock of getting rid of these non-tariff barriers. That's the thing that I think is why markets are celebrating this deal, even though there's a 10% tariff.
Let's talk a little bit about taxes and where you think the progress is being made with that. We did just have Senate Majority Leader John Thune on set talking about some of these things. One of the things he pointed out is that he's dealing with different math in the Senate than the House Speaker is in the House, and that it's a little complicated to work the math because each of those bodies has something slightly different that they'd like to see.
Right.
The leader himself said that, look, he'd prefer to see all these tax cuts that exist right now made permanent rather than maybe taking on some of the new promises that President Trump was laying out on the campaign trail. How do you score all of these different things for the economy? With
First,
pieces?
It's got to score to be a big positive for the economy, a much bigger positive for the economy even than the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. But the way to think about what's going on is that it's really easy to understand, but in some sense, they're moving pieces. The reason it's easy to understand is that the president said throughout the campaign what his high priorities are for taxes, like no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and so on. Interest-free auto loans. Those things are his priorities. Those are the things that he insists are going to be in the bill. And then the House and the Senate, they have some of their priorities are different, and they're working it out amongst themselves. And President Trump is clear that he has some things that absolutely red line have to be in the bill. And he also understands that in the end, as they work it out, there'll be things that one side or the other forces the other to do that not everybody agrees about that won't necessarily be in the top 10 list of the president's priorities. But that's very collegially being discussed in the Roosevelt Room and up on the Hill with Scott Bessent, me, and the leader and the speaker. And we're meeting almost every week right now to make sure that it works out. We had a great meeting this week with an incredible amount of progress moving forward. I expect that you're going to hear from Jason Smith sometime today of what the schedule for the tax bill will be, and it'll probably be really accelerated given what I'm hearing.
You think the rate's going back to 39.6, Kevin, to make room for some of the other provisions from the president? The president said he'd be okay with it, but he's not. He was kind of sounded like
he's not thrilled. He's not thrilled about it. He understands the argument. It's one of the things that the Senate and the House has to work out. I think I saw what Senator Thune was saying on your show, and he felt like there might be some scenario where he would consider that, but no, it's not high on the president's list. He even tweeted about it this morning again.
The president also on Truth Social just said many trade deals are in the hopper. All of them, there it is, all of them good or even great ones. He's.
It's true.
Okay, you might be listening.
I've seen him. It really is true, yeah.
Okay, he might have been listening. Maybe he found out from you, from watching what you just said.
Sometimes he does, often not.
Yeah.